Hi, this is Ed from 6 and this is episode 2 of You, Me, and the UKTC. This is going to be an episode that covers Data Scry Salvage and also the terrain of the UKTC. The reason I want to talk about terrain is I find that probably once an event, give or take, once every 5 games or so, I have an opponent who has a misunderstanding about some aspect of the terrain, whether that is about the way the UKTC terrain is in specifically. The smallest Ls, for example, are under 5 inches tall, so they don't have the obscuring keyword, or they don't benefit from the obscuring keyword. Or whether that's just someone who doesn't quite fully grasp terrain rules in 9th edition. I will say they're not the clearest. You do really have to sit down and read through them, or play plenty of games against people who understand how they work to really wrap your head around them if you haven't played through them before. I'm also taking a leaf out of Swisley's book, and we have the Instagram handles down here. My personal one, Edward F. Paints. I post incredibly infrequently. You're more than welcome to follow me. And also 6 Gaming, where we do post regularly. That is, funnily enough, not under my control. Otherwise, nothing would be done with that. So, terrain in the UKTC. There's 2 bits of terrain, or 2, you could break it down into 2 sections. The first is the ruins, and the ruins cover almost everything. So ruins are area terrain, which means that for the benefits, you either have to be standing on them or standing behind them. You can see that they have bases. The large Ls have big bases that cover a full square footprint. These little Ls here, they have a rectangular footprint. And then these mid-size Ls, the ones that you tend to find in the middle of the board, they have a small lip that you can stand on to get the benefit of, say, the light cover, but they don't have a full footprint, which means you can use them often as staging ruins. So what do all the keywords mean? Starting off with area terrain, the model has to be standing on the terrain to get the benefit, with the exception of obscuring, which is the first keyword of the terrain. Obscuring means that if you are stood behind the ruin, models cannot draw line of sight on you through the base. If you are fully covered by the base, if you're stood behind this ruin here in this little L, and a model tries to see you, it would have to be, over here somewhere to draw line of sight down here. This is going to be the main way that you use terrain in the UKTC, typically. It's going to be cowering behind these ruins, waiting to jump out on your turn and trying not to get shot. Obviously, the game's incredibly lethal at the moment, so instead of benefiting from small defensive buffs, +1 to a save, which is exponentially better on units with great saves. So if you've got guardsmen, they might not benefit too much from it, as opposed to Deathwing Terminators. You're much better just not getting shot, standing behind the ruin. Secondly, you've got breachable. Breachable means that infantry, swarms, and all the small stuff anyway, can walk through terrain. They don't have to walk around it. Cavalry have to walk around it. Vehicles have to walk around it. But infantry can just walk straight through as if there was a door there. You don't have to go around. Third keyword is light cover. Light cover is a +1 to your save if you are infantry, swarms, or beasts. Beasts being the third one that can move through on the breachable keyword. And that means that if you are spread out in the middle of the board, but for example, your Terminators, you might want to sit on the lip of the ruin, you can get cover by being behind here or by in front. I don't believe you can get cover by touching the wall. That's not something that the UKTC does, that other terrain organizers put in their mission packs. So you have to either be in the L or, in this case here, touching the lip outside to get the light cover. Then there's the defensible keyword, and defensible means that you can get one of 2 benefits, and you should be doing this every time. If you have every model of your unit touching the terrain, which admittedly for these Ls in the center is rare, you can either set to defend or hold steady. And that will either give you +1 to your overwatch, or rather you'll overwatch on 5s instead of 6s, which is very powerful with shooting armies such as Tau, or you'll get +1 to hit in combat, which is obviously quite nice if you're a more dedicated unit. This isn't something that you will use a lot, but it is something to keep in mind when it comes up. If your opponent is playing Tau and they are they've got, 5 crisis suits, and they're all sitting on the terrain. Perhaps you don't have a lot of shooting that you can threaten them with. Be careful when you charge. Make sure you order your charges correctly. Send in a cheap suicide unit to soak up the Overwatch or turn off Overwatch with a spell. The other keyword is scalable. Obviously, this means that your typical units can move up to the second floor. As you can see there's a second floor on the mid-size Ls, the smaller Ls, and then these big units here have multiple floors. I think it's 4, including the ground floor. So starting off with the mid-size Ls, these are the ones that you're going to be playing around the most. They are in the center of the board. So they are typically what you might call your staging ruins where you move up to, and then the next turn you push out from. You might be within range of an objective if you're behind the ruin. They are the best way to make sure that you don't just get shot off the board. The key difference with these Ls, if you've played WTC terrain or another big organizer in the UK, there's plenty of them. They have windows on the ground floor. They're not blocked off. There's nothing in the mission pack saying that you have, line of sight blocker on the ground floor like a lot of places do. This means that you can be much more aggressive with shooting units. For example, if you're playing Imperial Guard, Astra Militarum, and you have a lot of tanks or sentinels, it might be difficult for you to get an angle on your opponents if they're hiding behind the Ls. Because there's the windows, you can just drive your tank up, touch the lip of the building there, shoot through with your plasma and your flamers, and it's a lot harder for melee armies to hide from shooting if you're willing to be aggressive with your units. So on the terrain maps that you get in the map pack and the mission pack, this is the L, as you can see here, and the thick black line represents the wall, and then you can see the gray border that represents the lip of the terrain, the bit that provides the light cover that you can stand on. The important thing to note is the trick that a lot of people do is they will put their models lined up against this little lip here, and what that means is you can't fit the base of anything over 20, I think it's 25 mil. So if you're playing against Gene Stealers, or Repentia, they can absolutely charge you through the wall. They'll just stand down here and then they will rip and tear. But if you're playing against Space Marines or things on 40 mil bases like Custodes, they will find it more difficult to come around. Obviously, there is a second floor. People seem to forget that they can charge and put their models up there. It is scalable after all. Or they can just come around the sides. So where I put your safe in melee, safe from melee, sorry, you're not safe, you're safer. It makes it harder for a melee army to come and get you. This is something of an odd abstraction that I think we all just have accepted now. Some tournament organizers, I know the WTC have rules where you can fight through the wall, but that's not something the UKTC does, which does make it a little harder for melee armies to play on this terrain. Then we've got these big Ls. Oh, and I should say there are 4 of these on the board. There'll be 2 on your side of the board, the mid-board Ls, typically 1 in your deployment and 1 further up. Not always the case, but usually how it goes. These large Ls are huge. They will hide most models. I used to hide planes behind them before planes had to start in strategic reserve. I've had games where I've played against people who have hid multiple greater demons behind them. I'm talking Slanesh Keepers of Secrets, who are a little less bulky, so that's how they managed to fit multiple in there. You can fit Knights, Chaos Knights, Imperial Knights. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you're playing against an army that has some sort of insane alpha, because if you have to come round, you lose a turn of movement effectively. But you can hide pretty much anything you like in here. And it also has multiple levels. That's the key thing to know. If you're playing an army, for example, some sort of Space Marine army, and you're running Vanguard Veterans, this is a great place to squeeze all your models in so they don't get shot. You can fit, 5 models here, 5 models here. If it's in your deployment, you can also fit them on the front row there. It's also pretty typically lipped over an objective, so you can hold it safely from behind the wall. There's one mission that is not the case on, but we'll come to that one as we go. This means typically this is your home base. You might try and fit as much as possible in here. Now that we're going to be seeing Imperial Guard, they're going to be putting 9 heavy weapons squads, 9 heavy weapons bases in here. That's something we can all look forwards to. But it's the safest place for you to put your army in. Don't hide your entire army in here. That is something that I do see people doing. I love it when my opponent puts their entire army in there, or as much of their army as possible, because it typically means I win the game, because they're a turn behind where they want to be, because they have to then move out to where I would have been able to shoot them anyway in the next turn, and they just lose a turn of scoring. Not a great place to be. You also have 4 of these small L's. These are below 5 inches. They do have the obscuring keyword because they're ruined, but because they're below 5 inches, they do not obscure. If you're standing a armature behind here, the armature can be seen. It is tall enough to be seen. You do not have the obscuring rule because it's below 5 inches, something to keep in mind. However, if you're playing infantry, if you're playing bikes, if you're playing small vehicles, you can hide some behind here. I've definitely hid Caladius behind here before, which is a fantastic place to put them because they just fly up, and then next turn they can fly over and do whatever they need to do. These are the ones here. In this case, unlike the smaller L's, the mid-size L's, the grey doesn't represent the base, that just represents the overhang. They are also typically on the outskirts of the map, which makes hiding in them sometimes difficult because of the angles that you can get in. However, they're a fantastic place to start infiltrators, specifically Space Marine infiltrators with their sticky objective troop rules. If it covers a bit of an objective, start your infiltrators in there, your opponent's already on the back foot trying to clear you off. Finally, we have ruined walls or barricades, and these are terrible if you play a vehicle army, as I like to do. They lose, if you want to move over them, you are moving up 3 inches over, the ½ inch, and then down the other 3 inches. So you lose a lot of movement getting over them. You can use this to your advantage if you're playing against Armiger or War Dog spam, for example. You can sit in the middle and feel fairly safe from a charge if you know that, sure, they're only 5 inches away, but they're going to have to move up and over to get to you. That is quite a nice way to use them as some sort of movement blocking. Unlike the ruins, they are not area terrain. They are obstacles. What that means is you get the benefit if you're within 3 inches of them. That doesn't count for dense cover necessarily in the way that you might think. The way that interacts with dense cover is if you are within 3 inches of them, you don't take the penalty for shooting through the dense cover, but it doesn't give you dense cover if you're within 3 inches of them. The way the dense cover keyword works is if you cannot draw a straight line from every part of your base to every part of your opponent's base, then on a model in the squad, then you take the -1 to hit penalty. They are also a defense line. Defense line is if you charge, because obviously it typically takes up some space, if the unit that charges touches the ruin and then can be within 2 inches of the unit they've declared the charge on, they count as having made the charge. This makes it harder to sit on objectives in the middle of the board, but it's not impossible. As you can see here, you've got the ruined wall. They always come in pairs. They always link up. If you are sat around here, there is a spot that you can get to, I think it's around here, which is over 2 inches away from the wall. Not this wall, but if it's a vehicle, you can sit there fairly safely, and someone who has like a War Dog, for example, charges from this side. You're sat there, you're safe, you can't be charged. They have to come up and over and lose the movement to do that. But that is a little finicky to do. They are breachable. Infantry beasts and swarms can walk through as they can. Defensible. That is again set to defend or hold steady. That's one that people seem to forget that you can do with the ruined walls. You do have to have all of your models within 3 inches of the ruin, but if the ruined wall. But if you're holding the central objective and it's, for example, on the central objective, you're probably going to be fully within, unless you've trailed back for light cover purposes into a ruin or something along those lines. So that's a good one to remember. Even if you're just getting the +1 to hit in melee, that's quite a nice bonus to have that your opponent might not be expecting, hasn't factored into their internal maths. They are in an unstable position. You can't deploy anything on them. I don't think that really needs to be stated. They are incredibly thin, as you can see. There is no way that you could fit anything on them. I've never had anyone try to put anything on them. And they're also usually set up either on objectives or to cut off a firing line. They won't save your models. The way I always think about them is if my models are benefiting from the dents, it's not going to stop my opponent from killing them, but it probably will save an annoying amount of my opponents. And what I mean from that is your opponent, if they have thought this through, is just going to put more resources into killing something behind it, which is obviously valuable for you because they've got less to shoot at, but they're not some sort of like magic bullet sponge. But when you're shooting, you need to make sure that you're cognizant of the fact that it will hurt your damage output if you are shooting through them. So they're an annoyance that you have to factor into your decision making there. So Data Scry Salvage, Mission 2. This is probably the most polarizing map in terms of score in the mission pack. It is very much, it feels like a blowout map. It's not always a blowout, but it's very easy if you fall behind to really fall behind on this map. Why that is it is a hold 2, hold 3, hold more objective mission. So that is 4, 8, 12 if you're holding 2, 3 or more. And as you can see, it's not easy to hold many objectives. There's this one here that you can safely hold, either from your ruin there or this ruin here. There's this one here that you can fairly safely hold, although it is within, touching distance. But after that, you have to be out in the open. Sure, you can come in here and hide behind, but then your opponent just has to find some line of sight or walk up and charge you. It's very difficult to safely hold multiple objectives in this. I find, because I tend to play armies with not the best primary, but good shooting threats, neither me nor my opponent tend to score highly on primary throughout the game. I typically tend to score about 20 on primary, because I aggressively shut down my opponent's primary and they do the same to me. There is sticky objectives. If you stand on an objective and you have objectives secured, then you will, if you're standing on it in your command phase, you hold the objective and your opponent has to move on to it to take it off. That can be very frustrating. If you, for example, start here with some infiltrators, or some sort of forward deploy with OBSEC, and then I'm here, I shoot you off, that's fine, but I still have to allocate resources that are going to get shot off the board in your turn or charged to make sure that you're not scoring the primary just for existing. Obviously, that's a bit of a risky play. It's relying on you going first, but, for example. And there is the tertiary on this mission is do an action on your home objective. So it's really important to have cheap units that can just stand back and do something. And you get 1 point for each of the objectives in no man's land to a cap of 3. So if you're holding all 4, you get 3. If you're holding 1, you get 1, etc., etc. This is a map where going second feels really big. It's not the highest scoring for going second of all the maps. There is, for example, the mission where you've got hold 3, get 3 points at the end of the game for holding any in your opponent's half of the board. You might get 21 points at the end of the game. This one, you're only going to get really capping out at 15 on the primary. But because the primary is so poor going through, you might have just gone, your opponent might have just traded off fours if you're playing aggressively. And then whoever goes second might be able to swoop in and get a fat 15 at the end of the game, which is a huge, huge difference. Is if you're going from, you've got 22 or something along those lines, you've picked up some tertiary, they've got 37 because they've managed to swoop in and add 15. It's a big difference. You have to really be on your secondary game. So the two ruins here that are most important are these two, because these are not only your staging ruins, but they're also the only ones that you can defend. If you can get some obsec here, that is going to be the best way to get your foot into the game. It's not going to guarantee you primary, but if you've got this one fairly well defended because it's in your home, and this objective here with obsec on, it's hard for your opponent to just move on and take it away from you, which they absolutely will do if you don't have obsec on it. It's also, as you can see, very easy to attack all of the objectives depending on where you're deployed. It is an aggressive map. There is fighting all of the time. You're looking at even basic troops can move up here and make a charge pretty successfully if you're stood in the correct position. From this ruin, you can easily get to these two up here, vice versa. Then from the center, you can easily get to the middle two. It makes it quite hard to hold on to any objectives that you have gained ground in your turn. What does that mean? Well, if you're looking to triangle up and sit on 3 objectives, because you don't need to sit anymore, if you've got a huge advantage, if you've got the obsec advantage, there's no reason not to, as long as you're not spreading yourself too thin. But how do you want to do that? If you're playing maybe a more shooting army, and you want to play more defensively, if you feel like you're the control player, especially if you're going second, you might want to play around this triangle here. What that means is you're turning the board into a hammer and anvil deployment. So it's almost as if this is your board edge, and this is, your opponent's playing from over here, and you can castle up and then move out later on, take these firing lanes and try and keep your opponent off their objectives while scoring a reasonable amount yourself. If you're playing something with tanky obsec, such as Deathwing, you can try and play for the middle. I haven't done this myself, but I have talked to a couple of very good players who do play that style of army. There's a couple of Deathwing players I know who are talking about playing aggressively for the center. And I think that's a really interesting premise, because it's hard to shift you off if you're putting, blocks of 10 Terminators with objectives secured, feel no pains, -1 damage, which you can do. You can have the banner in the middle here. You can chain the Terminators out. You can have them touching terrain. You can have them with storm shields. You can make them very hard to shift. But that makes your opponent's life very difficult, because if they want to keep up with you on primary, they either have to shift Terminators, 10 Terminators from a point, or however many, to get their obsec on there, which is easier said than done, or they have to split themselves very thin and sit on this part of the map. Sit up here, and that's quite difficult if you're not playing some sort of fast army. Eldar will be happy to dance around, but if you're playing into, I don't know, let's say Death Guard, they're going to really struggle. They're going to have to come and fight you, which you're probably tankier than Death Guard, which is, maybe not something that people would like to hear. So yeah, if you've got tanky obsec, playing for the middle of the board, I think is a really good aggressive move to put your opponent on the back foot. Alternatively, especially if you've seen your opponents deployed to sort of this side, they're skewing down towards the bottom because they want to play for the safer positioning, you can come over here and you can put your resources down, you can mess with their obsec, and you can send maybe a token gesture up here that they will struggle to respond to because they're playing more slowly. This is something that I would do if I had the speed advantage. So the other thing you really have to be careful with, especially now that strategic reserves are free, and I think we're going to see a change in how list composition is built. For example, there's going to be a lot of shooting units that want to start off the board and then come in from reserves. If you're not playing on a Dawn of War deployment, if you're playing on anything with angles, it's very strong to just walk off the side of the board and be able to shoot a good angle without your opponent responding. such as, the Votan Hearthkin, not Hearthkin, the Thunderkin, that's the one. Iron Hands Devastators, instead of just putting them all in a drop pod, eggs in one basket. I think there's a lot of armies that are going to be able to use this sort of strategy. Turn 2, your opponent's going to be able to come in anywhere over here outside of 9 inches away from you. So you've got to really think about your screening, especially if you go second. You've only got 1 turn to move and then make sure that you're screened. What's this going to look like? Well, if you're sat in here or down here, you've got to be very aware that your opponent can come in within 6 inches of the board edge, so further up than that, and they can get angles onto you if you haven't screened correctly. This can be difficult because you may end up feeding your cheap chaff units to your opponent to stop them from coming in, and then they come in the next turn anyway. So it is something that you really want to be considering in deployment. They have to, announce that their reserves are off the board as you're deploying. You can think, how do I want to respond to this? Do I want to have more up here? Do I want to have, a couple of units of chaff up here so I can cover it for turns 2 and 3 so my opponent can't come in? Do I want to maybe tuck more in over here instead of being able to respond this way? Turn 2 is not too bad. Turn 2 you can screen out quite easily. Turn 3 is where it gets very difficult. Turn 3, you absolutely have to have your backfield screened. This is because the bottom edge here, the one that you'll be standing against, that is your board edge, which means that come turn 3, when your opponent can come into your deployment zone, which they are prohibited from doing turn 2 with strategic reserves, there are a lot of spots that I've marked out here, for example, where you're not naturally screening out. You probably have a little unit here. You probably have some units up here, but you might not have anything here. You might not have anything here, despite it being safe to do so. And that means that your opponent might be able to just drop in a unit here, and they can light up the unit that's holding your objective. If you've aggressively moved out, or if you've moved up here to stage, that means that you might be denied your primary on your own objective, which is something you absolutely cannot afford to be denied. If they come in here, you're staging units. If you've got, for example, Vanguard Vets who are ready to respond to these two, if Thunderkin can come in and just pick those units up, that's a huge blow that it's very difficult to respond to, because you also then have to come backwards to respond to them. It is something that you have to be really cognizant of when you're deploying. So that is the long and short of Data Scry Salvage. I think it is a mission that you want to really try and get the upper hand in. You don't necessarily have to play it super aggressively, but once you have that advantage, your opponent can find it very difficult to swing back into. It is a mission where having forward deploy, especially forward deploy with OBSEC, is very valuable. If you can start off up here and turn 1 get some OBSEC, then even if you move that unit out over here, do some move blocking or what have you, you still hold it. There's a lot of stuff you can do to make your opponent's life difficult.